Alright guys, welcome back to another Dolphin Computer Service video, and today we have a interesting one here. Got a thing in the package that I'll show you here really quick, and it's kind of a continuation on the different processors that we use in computing. Back when I had showed the PowerBook G4, the unibody MacBook Pro, and the Nintendo Switch and PS Vita and all that. Well, I have another type of device here that technically classifies it an embedded system, but it's used for a more, not an industrial purpose, but I'll just show it to you here. This is a Tamagotchi. So why do I have a Tamagotchi? Because I'm kind of a child at heart. So I used to have these when I was a kid. And this is actually a fascinating device here. So the question I'm probably going to get is, why am I reviewing or showing you guys a Tamagotchi that could be had for about 10 bucks versus the Apple Watch here that cost about 600, about $399, and the iPad Pro that I'm using to record this on is about, 800 bucks on retail, which I didn't pay for. I got it on a deal because you always get the deal. So the reason why is because this thing is actually pretty smart. So as we have R2-D2 dancing about here, because why shouldn't you? What's in here is a version of the 6502 processor. So what's a 6502 processor? It was before what we had in x86. So this particular one is a 4-bit CPU. In fact, I will actually have the data sheet for this thing in the comments, and not the comments, in the description below. It's made by Epson, yes, the same people that make your camera and your printer, and it's used for a variety of things, not just Tamagotchis. But before, when the 6502 was common, it was the main CPU that was used in personal computing before, the IBM compatible became a thing. So computers that had it were basically almost all of them: a Commodore, an Atari, a Compaq, an Apple II, believe it or not, has a 6502 in it. Originally made by Motorola, and it was in partnership with IBM. And they actually made, different versions of these. So this particular one is a 4-bit CPU, which means that you can only go up to 4 bits worth of, of line and code. But for 4-bit, it's actually really smart in the sense that this thing learns. It's not learn as in Skynet learn. So if your name is Sarah Connor and Kyle Reese, you should be okay. You don't have to worry about no T800 coming after you as of yet, but it learns. And what I mean by it learns is it sees how you play the game. So as as I have R2-D2 dancing here, I'll make him play a game. Wrong button. I told you I'm terrible at games. So I'm going to select here, put out the fire. And the goal is you have to press the A button, which is this one where my thumb is, a certain number of times in order to put the fire out. So once I see the fire, I just have to keep pressing it, and R2-D2 will eventually do his job in putting out the fire. So now that the fire's out, and we have saved the Millennium Falcon from becoming a pile of ash in the endless void of space, I'm going to actually tell you why this is smart. So the smart thing about this is it sees how you play the game, and depending on how you play the game, it will either level up quickly or slowly how R2-D2 develops his skills. It'll also unlock other things, such as more games besides the fire one. There's also hollow chests if you so desire. There's more games to unlock, and depending on if it sees that you use him a lot or if you don't use him a lot, you'll actually get people come and invade R2-D2 and try and kill him. And the point of that is once they try and kill R2-D2, your goal is to do the most R2-D2 thing as possible, which is turn around and run away. So this 6502 is actually a lot more interesting than, the processor you have in your phone or in your Apple Watch, because this is what we call CMOS, which is a conductive metal oxide semiconductor. So the nice thing about a CMOS and this 6502 in general is that they use very little power. There's actually 2 button cells back here. It's also multi-voltage, which means it can go as high as 4.7 volts, if I remember the datasheet correctly, which I will link in the description, and as low as 2.2 volts. So if you're running on a battery like this, it not only draws very little power, so you don't have to worry about running out of battery all the time or charging this thing. You could probably go a month on this thing without actually having to worry about it. 2, it also produces very little heat. So when you're in a little kid's toy here that's supposed to go on your keychain, and Tamagotchis have a very interesting history. The original ones, I used to have a Gen 2, which had a little antenna sticking out, and you can connect to it with an IR port, like you would with your TV. Those things were brutal. So if you weren't on top of this thing, once it hatched, if you weren't on top of it, it'd die in like half a day. And it got to the point where this thing was so brutal at your emotions that kids would actually cry that their little pet has died. And it actually got to a point where they named it the Tamagotchi effect, because kids were getting emotionally attached to this thing. And they actually had to ban it from all the schools. I was one of the lucky ones where they didn't have it, that ban, but that was a thing. You could actually look it up, the Tamagotchi effect, and how it taught us soulless people how to have somewhat of a soul, at least. So another thing this thing does with the processor is, when I mean by it learns, this is like a set parameter. This doesn't have, some 16 core Apple neural engine in it. Don't expect it to, develop self-awareness and, run away like a real R2-D2, as fun as that would be. But what you could do with this is it kind of teaches you, like life, like R2-D2 doing what he does best. He gets dirty, so you have to clean him up. And if you don't clean him up, he gets depressed, and eventually he dies, which means he just runs away and finds a better Han Solo, maybe one that isn't so crappy. But or maybe he actually finds the Luke Skywalker he's been looking for all these years. But so he takes a poop, which him getting dirty, or he needs to sleep, which is actually him need to recharge. So you would recharge him here by pressing what looks like a battery. You click recharge, and then a little thing come up and make some noise, and it will means he's recharged. He also does this automatically, believe it or not, which is what I mean by he's smart. It's all based on the time that you put in. It also tells you time, which is another thing why the little processor in here is so good and it's so interesting, because it's one thing that controls this entire little machine. It's one chip that controls the inputs, his emotions, all the parameters. It holds, the chip even has storage on board, which holds the OS, which is measured in kilobytes. And I think the RAM is like measured in bytes. I have to really dive deep into it. Again, I'll leave it in the description. But it's actually a cool little thing that as a kid, you don't know about. And then when you actually become an adult and actually have to live the life that this poor little thing is trapped inside of, you actually learn that it's actually a fascinating thing. And like I said before, not only is it learning, it's also kind of adapts to you. So if it sees that you are a complete and utter piece of garbage of a human owner to an inanimate droid object, it will actually run away, and it will, you know, and if you had the original one like I did, the game would punish you, and boy did it punish you, because especially if you had a soul when you were born, it would actually make you cry. And I remember as a kid, all the girls would cry over this. I was one of the only males that had one of these things, because these things were dope. Like, I mean, I'm telling you, you could when you had the connected version like I had, you can connect to it. You could, you know, have your pet visit your other pet friends, or, you know, they could run away together, you know, either get married or go visit Skynet in the great big Tamagotchi beyond. I don't know what they did, but, you know, it was a cool thing. And the 6502, this, you know, little processor in here, also controls the LCD. It controls the sound. So it's actually, you know, a graphics. I use that term loosely in this whole assembly here, but it actually does quite a bit on a single little chip. That's so cool. You can hold it in the palm of your hand, and the battery will last months on end. They use this CPU and other things, like mission critical things, you know, where it always has to work. Kind of an example of that NASA rover on Mars that I talked about is mission critical. CNCs will use this, you know, just, you know, basic inputs and outputs, you know, just to, you know, tell the machine where to go, you know, how to cut, you know. Another reason why I made this video is because this is a perfect example of using code to the most efficient possible way. So with modern day computing, and this video is kind of brought about by another YouTuber called Outlaw. He does a lot of stuff in terms of computing and talking about. I'll link his channel and the video in the description as well if you want to see it, where he talks about modern software versus older software. And specifically, the video was called why slower, older computers were faster than newer, faster computers, something like that. And that's because of a processor like this. You know, nowadays we take for granted, and I will do a video on just software by itself. I know I've done basically hardware up until this point, but I promise I'll get to it. Is we take for granted the fact that our Apple Watch, our phone, our tablet can basically computate all the trajectories it takes to get Apollo 11 to the moon on our wrist or in our hand. So knowing that today's, you know, processors and hardware is more than capable of doing it, we've kind of lacked on the software side. And not that having this powerful hardware is a bad thing. In fact, it's actually great, because you know, when you had a 6502 Apple II or Atari or Commodore back in the day, running an Excel program was good. Playing a game was okay. And if you try to do any two of those things at the same time, you were crazy, because it couldn't really do it. So the fact that we have this powerful hardware today is, you know, incredible. But why I say this is an example, because believe it or not, you can hack this thing like any computer. You can hack it. There's also, I'm not going to link that group, because the last thing I need is Bandai Namco, I think is the people that make this, to come at me with a warrant saying, well, what the hell are you doing promoting piracy on our devices? So you didn't hear this from me. But there's people that hack them, and there's websites out there that'll show you how to hack them. If you want to hack them and learn, if you're excuse me, here as the frog decides to come out. If you are a young software engineer or aspiring software engineer, or, you know, someone that wants to learn how to code and be a programmer, learning how to code on something that's so limited as this is perfect, because the whole world just doesn't run on, you know, Apple Series watches, Apple designed computers and processors, or Intel or AMDs. A lot of the industrial world on the industrial side uses processors like these, where, like I said in the other one that I didn't cover, which is the MIPS, is another example. If you had a PSP that has a MIPS in it, they use these kind of processors because they, one, don't want to spend the money to, buy something that's complex. And two, they don't need anything complex. It has to work all the time. So kind of like what I do here when you consult with me on what, is needed from you in a computer. I'm not going to, you don't want to pay for something that you don't need, and you don't want to buy something that will not perform what you need. So in the industrial world, when they use processors like these, because the job needs to get done, they need it, they need to have it done and working all day, every day, night, poor weather, hot or cold, it has to run. And usually they're very constricted in what you can do. So when you hack one of these, you'll learn that, you can't, what looks like you can't really do much on it, they're able to pull out some quite impressive stuff. So we go here, we go to the games, and I only have 2 unlocked. I literally just got this the other day. So this is the hollow chess. I'll play it with you here while I be completely terrible. So the goal is to beat Chewbacca at his own game and have him not rip off your sockets. So you just, whatever letter comes up, you have to just press it in a way to beat the game. And supposedly, according to the instruction manual, which I actually read, believe it or not, if you beat him 5 times in a row, he gets super upset. Which I've done already, believe it or not, but he can't seem to be upset at me. I guess I'm too cute to be mad at. Oh, never mind. I spoke too soon. Now he's upset, and now he's going to probably kill me. So that's Chewbacca on board the Millennium Falcon, I guess. I mean, I'm assuming that's what this is. So I'm going to just let him rant a little bit before he completely kills me. Told you I was bad at games, even simple ones like this. But, there, believe it or not, there's more games than just that. They're just locked away because I'm a low level and I just started. So, he's able to do all these emotions and do all these things. There's all these sounds that he can do. You're controlling an LCD at the same time along with the sound controller. You're putting out little graphics like this. You're learning on the go. When you actually decide to, to put in the time and effort to program with this, because you can have the best hardware in the world, but if your software sucks, what's the point? Like, without software, your computer is basically a really big brick. Or in this case, a keychain size brick. But, when you learn how to code on something as constricting as this, and you can get it to run flawless and well, and maybe even have some space left over, when you actually get to powerful hardware, you could do a lot of stuff. So to me, if you're a software engineer or a coder or a programmer, and you're, just starting out and you want to learn, hacking one of these or getting hardware similar that you can purchase and practice on is actually a benefit, because it'll help you out in the long run. Because not only can you do consumer grade stuff, when you're maybe working for a video game company. Let me see if I can kind of not have him pissed at me anymore. Oh, I have C-3PO. And now I'm running away. And now I'm back to dancing. Okay, so not only can you, if you're some game developer that you're now capable of, doing, because you have the skill set to work on something so constrict as this, but if you just even want to work, even a nuclear power plant, they're using chips like this to control, uranium and fuel rods. They're using stuff like this. in the industrialized world, they're not, a lot of times they're not running the latest and greatest. They're running things from 1980, 1990, you know. Believe it or not, in New York City, you know, that fancy light show that they have, that it tells you, you know, the stock price and the stock name and how up and down it went. They were on the news a few years ago because the system had crashed, and they were running Windows 3.1. Windows 3.1 came out in the mid 90s. It was either in the 1990s. That's when they came out. I don't remember the exact date at the moment, but you know, usually in the industrialized you know, sectors of computing, we're still using old technology, because even though it's old and, you know, it's not the latest, you know, A15 Bionic, or, you know, the latest Ryzen 9 with 52 cores and whatnot they add into it in 10 years from now, you know, they just need it to work. And these processors and equipment and hardware have developed a reputation that they are reliable. And a lot of times that's just what companies need. They just need it to work all the time. And if you're in the military, you definitely seen a bunch of these around, these types of processors around. I heard that some of their equipment still use Intel 286s, you know, from back in the 80s. So again, if you are a engineer, software engineer, you know, programmer, coder, whatnot, and you want to learn how to actually, you know, do good programming, one of these things is great. So this is just another example of the types of processors we have out in the world. We will be getting to the software side pretty soon, hopefully. I had a viewer recommendation that they wanted to see a Raspberry Pi or an Arduino. I am going to get my hands on one really soon, I promise, because that actually will be used for me to do network analyzing, and I can actually show you guys how to set up a server using one for a PBX, where a PBX is, you know, like you have two phones, you know, like one's in an office, one's at, you know, like the main desk, and you only have one phone number, and it allows you, you've probably seen on TV where the front desk receptionist is like, hey, Dr. Brown, your patient's here, and he's like, send them in type deal. That's what that's used for. You know, you don't need a fancy computer to run a server. You can literally use a little Raspberry Pi that fit in the palm of your hand, and you can have a server there. So again, we'll be getting to that shortly, and thank you all for watching this video and I guess the review of this new Star Wars Tamagotchi that came out. Hope to see you on the next one, and I hope you learned something.